Hey guys, welcome along to the show. This is the final episode of Masters of Universe Revelation. This episode is entitled Comes With Everything You See Here, and for me it was a very, very satisfying ending to the series. Now, as far as storyline goes here, it's a lot of fighting, heck of a lot of fighting in this episode, but it is very well done. The storytelling in it is great. I really did enjoy it. There's quite a few instances in this episode where, in my mind these days, and I've found it a lot as a self-taught indie filmmaker, I dabble in that from time to time. It's very, very difficult to come up with something brand new these days. I think we've got to a point now where we're in a place where we're trapped in trying to tell new stories using old techniques. You know, anything that you can come up with these days, chances are someone's done it before you, and you see quite a few instances of that. I don't know why that word was so hard to say, but it was. We do see a lot of that in this episode. Pretty much the demons and the humans, all the characters in Eternia are fighting outside Castle Grayskull in this episode. He-Man, Skeletor and Cringer are battling Evelyn inside the castle, and Teela is going through her transformation to become the new sorceress. Now, that took a little bit longer than I was expecting it to take in this episode, but there's a few elements of her character that are still not unclear to what she has to do. It's been laid out to her by a vision of her mother, the sorceress, and what she has to do, what she has to give up to become the sorceress. But Teela is still holding back at the beginning of this episode, and you know, it turns out that she's fully prepared to make the sacrifice, but in her own way, not the way that every sorceress has done up to this point. It's like, if you become the sorceress for Grayskull, you have to turn your back on everything and give your life 100% to the protection of the castle, of the power, keeping balance within the universe, all that sort of stuff. But Teela is like, you know, her thing has been that she's felt very left out her whole life. She didn't know her mother. She was, in her mind, adopted. But in this series, we kind of got to realise that Duncan, Man-at-Arms, was in fact her father, but he had to keep that private as well, because you know, they don't so much say it in the series, but it's to protect us all, to protect Teela. You know, if it got out who her mother was, and you know, it'd be a vulnerable side to the sorceress and whatnot. So it's all protection up to this point. But in Teela's mind, all those personal connections, family, friends, can only make her stronger in her role as a sorceress, and she's not prepared to give that up. You know, that's always been her source of strength up to this point. She's going to continue to use that while she is the sorceress, and you know, why she takes on the challenge of becoming the sorceress. So she does transform into the sorceress, and back on Eternia, the fight is not going good. The demons are breaking the lines, and Man-at-Arms gets the opportunity to fight alongside the king in this battle, which is a nice little option. In the castle, Evelyn is holding all the cards. She's got the sword of power, No sign of He-Man yet. He's still Prince Adam. But to everybody's surprise in the episode, Orko turns up. Now, knew that was going to happen. Of course, Orko got a nice little death sequence in the episode 5, part 1. I want to say it was the end of episode 4. But it did say back then that, and I was going in the sequence of these episodes, I've kind of slipped up, I've been a little bit late putting these out now, but it did say at that point that, and this is an example of, pulling on pre-existing material. I said way back then that I thought we were going to get a Gandalf the Grey situation from Lord of the Rings, where he made the sacrifice and returns as Gandalf the White. That's what happens with Orko in this episode. He returns, he's got his full potential now. He is pretty much unstoppable in the realm of magic in this episode. So this froze Evelyn. She wasn't expecting this to happen, and of course we had that moment earlier in the series where they connected in their personal backstories, and you seen her vulnerable side more or less. So when he turns up, she's not expecting this, and he doesn't overpower to the point where he can beat her, but he beats her back hard enough that he gets the Sword of Power off her and into the arms of Prince Adam, where he uses that, of course, to call down the power, transforms to He-Man, and instead of just powering up Cringer to become Battle Cat, he powers up Skeletor to become Mega Skeletor, that he was at the beginning of part 2 in the series, and Skeletor is also shocked and surprised, and why? And He-Man's like, because I want you to know what it's like to save the universe. That's something that I really, really love in these sorts of shows. I've been a lifelong fan of shows like not just Masters of the Universe, but Transformers and that sort of stuff. There's always an episode or storyline that pops up somewhere along the line, and most of these shows where the two main characters on the good and bad side have to join forces to beat a common enemy or whatever situation it is. I really enjoy that when it happens. So to do that again here just really brought back the 80s in a big bad way for me. Really, really did enjoy it. So Teela turns up at this point and takes on Evelyn, but Evelyn, knowing that this is the new Sorceress of Grayskull, pretty much just laughs in her face when she turns up, and she's like, you know what, I know the score here. The Sorceress is trapped in Castle Grayskull. For me to beat you, I just have to go outside. And she flies off, and to her surprise, Teela follows her. When Teela made the decision to take things in her own direction when she became the Sorceress, that's something that she was able to change, and she's no longer stuck in Grayskull. The only way the previous Sorceress could leave was to take on the form of Soar, the eagle. That's the only way she could leave the castle, but she couldn't leave it in human form. She could only get as far as the jaw of the castle. But yes, in this episode, Teela gets out and goes to war with Evelyn, and they kind of transport themselves to like a different realm, let's just say, in this episode, and do battle there on their own. And Evelyn seems to have the upper hand the whole way through this battle, and if you're eagle-eyed enough, you'll realise where they're fighting at is the vision that Evelyn had whenever she was exploring the power. She went back to the beginning of time. She essentially seen the death of God at the beginning of time. Soar, the eagle, getting bit by the snake after, the water's edge, ram taking a drink, or goat, whatever you want to call it. A snake bites it, it dies. Sora comes down, grabs the snake, takes it up into the sky. The snake bites the eagle. The eagle dies, goes into a nosedive into the water. That's why Evelyn has gone off and won. As far as she's concerned, the universe has no master, and it's just better that it's ended here and now, and that's what she's going to do. So she seems to be holding all the cards at this point, and yes, it's finally revealed that you didn't choose this place, I did. This is Teela. She's like, this is my vision. And she pretty much shows Evelyn what she didn't see. It's just like you stopped looking whenever you thought you knew everything. You jumped to conclusions here. Here's what actually happened. We do get a snippet of that vision at the beginning of the episode whenever Teela's in her transformation phase, becoming the sorceress. And so this is her trump card. She's going to bet everything on here. It's like, look, open your eyes and actually see what happened here. And of course, Sora dying after getting bit by the serpent, and then you see the water bubbling and the rebirth of Sora coming up from the waters again and bringing life to Eternia and the rest of the universe as well. And like, Teela's, you know what, you're 100% right. It's death, it's destruction, it's pain, but it's everything else as well. It's life, it's love, it's all that good stuff. So Evelyn, realising the error of her ways, returns the power that she had taken, and they return back to the material realm, let's just say. But while all this is going on, of course, we've got Ram Man turns up in this episode as well. I was overjoyed to see Ram Man, probably one of my most favourite characters in the entirety of He-Man the Masters Universe. He's just so random and so weird, and it's just a genuine pleasure to see him in this episode. He turns up for a few seconds, but it's enough to make you smile. A big, dopey, cheesy grin. It was great. But of course, while there, Evelyn and Teela are doing their battle. Over here, we still have the big fight going on at Grayskull, and of course, Skeletor thinking, okay, we're all doomed. Evelyn is the most powerful being in the universe. She's hell-bent on destroying it. We're all doomed. I'm not going to go out until I take out He-Man. So he switches sides. He tries to fight He-Man, and they're in a standoff. And to harken back to another, if you want to compare it to something else, like as I say, we've got to a point now where we're kind of using old ways of telling new stories. If you compare it to anything, the final fight between these two in this episode, it would be Rodimus Prime and Galvatron at the end of Transformers the movie, where Rodimus Prime lifts him up and chucks him through the side of Unicron, and he falls out into oblivion, essentially. That's what you kind of get here. It's like, Skeletor is like in hand-to-hand combat with He-Man, and he's like, this is the way it should end. He-Man and Skeletor locked in eternal battle. At which point, He-Man lifts him, and he's like, that's not about us, and like he launches him and under the horizon, and that's kind of the last you see of Skeletor, you think. But yes, and then we get our final happy ending in the episode, where Teela, the new sorceress, returns with Evelyn and uses the power to restore everything and send the demon army back to the underworld. But what she wasn't expecting to happen was Orko, having been resurrected along with these guys, whenever she starts to reset everything, he's going to have to return as well. This portal opens up, all these guys start getting sucked in, and of course Orko starts to get sucked in as well, and he's like, it's okay, I knew this was going to happen, I knew I was going to have to go back, but I'm just thankful that this time I got a chance to say goodbye. And as he starts to glide up into the sky, this little hand comes up, grabs hold of him, and it's Evelyn. And she's like, not this time. And she holds him back from getting transported back to the underworld or wherever he ended up at. So at the end of the episode, we get pretty much everybody back in the familiar places again. You've got Duncan, Man-at-Arms, has been restored back to Commander of the Guard, and he is promoting Andra to Man-at-Arms status, which is where we seen Teela at the beginning of the series. And Teela's there as the new sorceress. Of course, she can leave Greyskull now, so she's in the palace along with everybody else, enjoying her family and her friends, and the king and queen's there. Prince Adam is with them. Everybody's happy, and at the end we get a little moment between Prince Adam and Teela where he's like, you know what, you're the new sorceress now, and you're the first one that can leave the castle, so I can see a version of this where I'm not needed. And Teela's like, you know what, the sorceress is always going to need her champion, plus you go where I go. And that's been a big thing with these pair in this series, is like best friends, lifelong friends. Where I go, you go. And you can sort of see a little romance blooming between the two of them in this series, but it's not, they don't delve into that, which I think was a good decision. And yes, so they're happy, contented, and then we go and we see what happens. Skeletor after this, so he's gone back to Snake Mountain to reclaim a seat there, but of course you've got Trapjaw and Triclops in there with their techno cult, so Skeletor is going to town on these guys, taking out his wrath on them. He's like, you know, I held the power in my hands and I still would have had it if it wasn't for you, Blither and Boobs, doing this nonsense instead of backing me up. And Triclops is like, you know, Motherboard made us do it, and there's this huge big carving of Motherboard up there, and Skeletor's like, oh, this is your master now? Well, you can worship the pieces. So he goes to destroy it with the Havoc Staff, at which point it repels all of his magic and tries to transform into this winged robotic woman. And again, to hearken to something that this would remind you on, it kind of reminded me of the Borg Queen in Star Trek. So there again is another example of, you know, pre-existing material being reused and something new. That's just where we're at. And but of course Skeletor's been restrained by Trapjaw and the rest of the cult members that are there, and this thing, these like tentacles come out of the tips of its fingers and connect themselves to Skeletor and start to change him into like a techno cult member, and he's like, no, it can't be, I can't believe it, sort of a deal. At which point a little compartment opens up in the forehead of this thing, and this little symbol appears. And if you know the series at all, it is the symbol of Hordak. Hordak, if you can recall the earlier franchise, now forgive me, the last time I seen Masters of the Universe in total would have been when it was first aired on television, way back in 83, 84, whatever reruns were done of the show back then. I can't recall if Hordak ever showed up in He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, but he was the main villain in She-Ra, Princess of Power, back in the day. And his backstory is that he was Skeletor's mentor. He was Skeletor's master at the time. So to finish off this series with the fact that Hordak could be making a comeback through the techno cult as an interesting one. So we cut it there. I can't recall. I have been listening to podcasts and video updates on this series from well before it came out. I was tracking this for probably 2.5 years before it was released. Of course, the global situation and the planet right now, the health situation, let's just say, held back the release of this series. But I've been a Kevin Smith fan for years now, so I've been listening to podcasts and watching videos of his for a long time, so I knew that he was working on a project that he couldn't talk about, and this is what it was. So from the little snippets that I've heard throughout the whole process up till now, I could be wrong here, but I think there was, I want to say that there was maybe a slight licensing issue and using some of the characters from the She-Ra universe, but to tease them, I think it was okay. So we'll see what happens right there. It's just it's a nice way of finishing off the series. But another thing I did pick up on from Smith was that if the figures are there, if the viewing figures back it up, and show the powers that be, show them that it's been a good enough run, it's been a good enough hit, and the viewing figures, he's allowed to come back to do something else. Now, I really did enjoy this series. It was fantastic. It was no shock, no surprise where they're going. This series continued on a story that started off back in 1983 in an episode called, as actually episode 6 of the original series. I've got the DVD right here. Episode 6 was a story called Teela's Quest, where it was revealed exactly who she was and what her potential was going to be, where she'd eventually end up. So this essentially finishes off that storyline. So it was good. As a fan of the show that was watching this back in 83, I was like 4 years old whenever this series came out. So to be sitting at 42 years old and getting a series where it updates one of the old storylines, there's been a lot of kickback on the fact that it was very much Teela's story and not so much He-Man's story. But I'm okay with that. If you know the series, all those characters all stood shoulder to shoulder throughout the original run of the series as well. It was never just about this. The show might have been called He-Man, the Master of the Universe, but it wasn't always about him. He was the main character in the series, but a lot of the side characters, Teela for example, and the vast majority of those episodes was up shoulder to shoulder with him. So it was a very satisfying finish to this run, and if they do it again, I'll be content to watch another series of it, and if not, it's all good too. We've got a nice little rounded off finish there with an open end. So if they come back to revisit the Hordak thing, I'm there for it. And if they don't, well, the story they told up to this point with the characters, the pre-existing characters that we loved as children, that little story there, what they went through, where they ended up, was satisfying in my mind. So it's all good at the end of the day. That's going to do it for this episode, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you in the next one.